They say fame gives you everything. But that rainy Thursday, Keanu Reeves gave it all up just to follow a woman into a forgotten alley. What he saw there didn't just change him. It changed everything. Far from the flashing cameras, Keanu, the man known not just for his roles, but for his quiet kindness, did something no one could have predicted. He followed Clara, his soft-spoken housekeeper, to a place hidden from the world's gaze. There, behind worn-down walls, he didn't just stumble upon a garden, he discovered something far greater, a spark of hope, untapped talent, and a mission with meaning. What unfolded changed him deeply and might just change you too. This is a story that invites you to see the world through different eyes. So tell us, where are you watching from? Let's step into the wonder together. The rain came down in relentless sheets, a gray veil shrouding the small town of Riverbank, where the Willow River churned with a fury it hadn't shown in decades. The wind howled, a primal scream that tore through the community garden nestled along the river's edge, a patchwork of hope cultivated by calloused hands and dreaming hearts. In mere hours, the floodwaters had undone years of labor. Tomato vines lay uprooted, their red and green fruits bobbing like forgotten toys in the muddy deluge. Cornstalks bent and snapped, and the trellises for beans sagged into the earth, defeated. Amid the wreckage stood Lila, a 9-year-old girl with braids plastered to her cheeks, sobbing over the shattered remains of her prized tomato plant. Her small hands reached for the broken stem, as if she could will it back to life. Nearby, Evan, a boy tethered to a wheelchair, stared at the devastation from the garden's edge. The mud-slicked path barred him from entering, but his eyes traced the ruin with a quiet grief that spoke louder than words. Clara, the steadfast housekeeper who had served Keanu for years, stood ankle-deep in the flood, her face streaked with rain and tears. Keanu, watching from the sidelines, felt a jolt. Clara, the woman who faced every challenge with unshakable resolve, was crying. It was the first time he had seen her break. The storm had not just ravaged the garden, it had torn at the soul of Riverbank. In the cramped living room of Mrs. Harper, a widow whose home had become the town's unofficial gathering place, the community huddled, their faces etched with despair. The air was thick with the scent of damp clothes and bitter coffee. Thomas, Lila's father, a man whose broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world, spoke first, his voice raw. "We've lost everything," he said, his words falling like stones. "Years of work, of sweat, of dreaming, it's all gone." Nina, who ran the local grocery with a smile that could brighten the gloomiest days, sat in the corner, her hands twisting a dishcloth. "How do we feed our families now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain's relentless drumbeat against the windows. The garden had been more than a source of food, it was a lifeline, a symbol of what they could achieve together. Its destruction felt like the death of hope itself. Keanu, standing quietly by the door, felt their pain settle into his bones. He saw not just the loss of crops but the shattering of a collective dream, the kind of dream that had once sustained him through his own darkest days. Then came Lila. She slipped through the crowd, her small hand finding Keanu's, her eyes wide and searching. "Mr. Keanu," she asked, her voice trembling but resolute, "can we build a garden that's not afraid of storms?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound, a spark in the suffocating gloom. It reached deep into Keanu, stirring memories of his childhood, of a boy who watched a hurricane reduce his family's modest home to splinters, of his mother's voice, steady and warm, telling him, "Loss is just a chance to build something stronger." That lesson had shaped him, had driven him to become an engineer who saw possibility where others saw ruin. In that moment, Lila's question became a call to action. Kneeling in the mud outside Mrs. Harper's home, Keanu traced a vision with his finger, a garden that could withstand nature's wrath. He sketched domed structures to shield crops from wind, channels to divert floodwaters, and a clever irrigation system to harness rain rather than be destroyed by it. His voice, steady and sure, carried a conviction that quieted the room. "We can do this," he said. "Not just rebuild, but create something unbreakable." But that night, just before he finished the sketch, the phone rang. It was Lila's mother. Their landlord, backed by Victor Lang's company, had doubled the rent. They were being evicted. Keanu froze. This wasn't just about tomatoes. It was war. But conviction alone couldn't erase doubt. Thomas, his brow furrowed, broke the silence. "It's a beautiful idea, Keanu, but where do we get the land? The money? We're barely scraping by as it is." The room murmured in agreement, the weight of reality pressing down. Keanu, undeterred, proposed approaching Apex Realty, a company that owned a nearby plot of elevated land, perfect for their vision. But Mrs. Harper's voice cut through the discussion, sharp with warning. "Victor Lang runs Apex," she said, her eyes narrowing. "He's as stubborn as they come, and he's got no love for you, Keanu. You two have crossed swords before." The mention of Victor, a man whose ambition was matched only by his ruthlessness, cast a shadow over the room. Keanu's history with him was a story of clashing ideals. Keanu's belief in community pitted against Victor's hunger for profit. The community agreed to pursue the idea, but their trust was fragile, a flickering flame in a storm. As the meeting dissolved, Keanu's gaze returned to Lila, who clutched a salvaged tomato from the wreckage, her eyes bright with a hope that refused to die. She reminded him of his mother, a woman who had worked tirelessly in factories to give him a chance at a better life, who had taught him that kindness was the strongest foundation of all. That memory anchored him, fueling a silent vow: he would not let this garden or this community fade into despair. The challenge was daunting, the odds stacked against them, but Keanu felt a fire kindling within. This was more than a project, it was a promise to Lila, to Evan, to Clara, to every soul in Riverbank who had poured their heart into that garden. The storm's aftermath painted a vivid tableau: the garden submerged, its vibrant green swallowed by brown torrents, Lila's tear-streaked face as she mourned her plant, Keanu's mud-streaked hands sketching a future in the earth, and the community, gathered in Mrs. Harper's living room, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and tentative hope. These images carried a raw power, a story that could resonate far beyond Riverbank. Lila's question, so innocent yet piercing, was the kind of moment that could capture hearts, a universal plea for resilience in the face of loss. Keanu's own story, his childhood shaped by hardship, his mother's wisdom guiding him, made him not just a leader but a mirror for anyone who had ever faced devastation and chosen to rise. And the looming conflict with Victor Lang added a layer of intrigue, a battle not just for land but for the soul of a community. It was a story that could spread, not because it was loud, but because it was true, because it spoke to the quiet strength that lives in every person who dares to rebuild after the storm. The rain had stopped, but the air still hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and broken dreams. Keanu stepped outside, the mud sucking at his boots, and looked toward the river. The willow was calmer now, its surface rippling under a sky beginning to clear. Somewhere in that stillness, he saw the outlines of the garden they would build, not just a place to grow food, but a testament to what happens when people choose hope over surrender. Lila's hand in his, Evan's quiet determination, Clara's rare tears, they were all part of this moment, this turning point. The path ahead would be fraught with obstacles, from Victor's opposition to the community's wavering faith, but Keanu knew one thing: they would face it together. And in that togetherness, they would find the strength to create something that no storm could ever destroy. The memory came to Keanu like a whisper, pulling him back to a rainy afternoon months before the storm that would change everything. It was a Wednesday, and Clara, his housekeeper of many years, had left his home earlier than usual, her departure marked by a quiet urgency that piqued his curiosity. There was something in her haste, the way she tucked a worn notebook under her arm, that felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Keanu, driven by an impulse he couldn't quite name, slipped into his old pickup truck and followed her through the winding streets of Riverbank. The town unfolded around him, its faded storefronts, its cracked sidewalks, its stubborn charm, until Clara's car turned into a neglected corner of the poorest neighborhood. There, in a narrow alley framed by sagging fences, Keanu saw it, a garden bursting with life. Rows of vibrant greens, lettuce, kale, spinach stood proud beside patches of wildflowers, their colors defiant against the gray drizzle. Children laughed and darted through the rows, their voices bright as the marigolds at their feet. At the heart of it all was Clara, her hands deep in the soil, guiding a group of kids with a warmth Keanu had never seen in her before. Clara's eyes widened when she spotted him, a flicker of shock giving way to a hesitant smile. "Didn't expect you here," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. She invited him in, and Keanu, feeling like an intruder in this hidden world, stepped into the garden. Lila, the 9-year-old with an infectious grin, took his hand and led him to a row of tomato plants. "You gotta talk to them," she said, her voice serious, "so they grow strong." Keanu, towering and awkward, knelt beside her, mimicking her gentle pats on the soil, his hands clumsy but earnest. Nearby, Evan, the boy in the wheelchair, showed Keanu an app he'd coded to track the garden's growth cycles, his fingers flying across a cracked tablet screen. Keanu listened, marveling at the boy's quiet brilliance. As the afternoon unfolded, he learned more. Thomas, Lila's father, had studied architecture before life's demands pulled him away. Nina, the grocery store clerk, had a deep knowledge of sustainable farming, and Clara, steady, unflappable Clara, revealed she was a trained environmental scientist, her passion for the earth evident in every carefully tended row. Keanu stood among them, a stranger in their sanctuary, and felt a pang of awe mixed with sorrow. "How," he asked Clara later, his voice low, "can so much talent be buried like this?" Not everyone welcomed his presence. Thomas eyed him warily, his arms crossed. "What's your angle, Keanu? This some kind of PR stunt for you?" The accusation stung, but Keanu understood the skepticism. He was an outsider, a man whose name carried weight in a world far removed from Riverbank struggles. To prove himself, he showed up day after day, his sleeves rolled up. He fixed a leaking irrigation pipe, the cold water soaking his shirt as Lila giggled at his efforts. He brought gardening gloves for everyone, handing them out with a sheepish smile, and slowly, the community's guard began to lower. One evening, Lila tugged at his sleeve, her eyes curious. "Why don't you ever talk about your guitar?" she asked, pointing to the old case he'd left in his truck. The question caught him off guard, stirring memories of his childhood, of sitting on a sagging porch with his mother, their fingers strumming soft melodies under a sky heavy with stars. Those nights had been his refuge, a reminder of love in a world that often felt unkind. Lila's question lingered, forcing Keanu to confront his own doubts. Was he truly helping, or was he imposing his vision on a community that hadn't asked for it? That uncertainty deepened one night when Clara invited him to her small apartment, its walls lined with books and faded diplomas. Over a pot of strong tea, she shared her story. She was a PhD in agricultural science, she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. She'd once dreamed of revolutionizing farming, but the system, rigid, unforgiving, had sidelined her, leaving her to scrape by as a housekeeper. "There are millions like me," she told him, her eyes meeting his. "People with dreams, with knowledge, just discarded." Keanu sat in silence, the weight of her words settling over him. He thought of his mother, who had worked grueling hours to give him a chance, and of Clara, whose brilliance had been stifled by circumstance. In that moment, the garden became more than a plot of land. It was a rebellion against a world that wasted its best. Lila's stories added another layer to Keanu's resolve. She spoke of her mother, who worked 3 shifts a day, her exhaustion keeping her from the garden's joys. "She wants to come," Lila said, her voice small, "but she's always so tired." Keanu saw the deeper cracks in Riverbank's foundation: inadequate housing, underfunded schools, families stretched to breaking. The garden was a start, but it wasn't enough. Inspired by Clara's expertise and the community's hidden strengths, Keanu began sketching designs for a new kind of garden, one that could withstand storms, with reinforced structures and smart water systems. He worked late into the night, his pencil moving across paper under the glow of a single lamp, each line a promise to build something lasting. But a shadow loomed. Word spread that Apex Realty, led by the formidable Victor Lang, was buying up land around Riverbank, driving up rents and squeezing families already on the edge. Victor's name carried a chill. Keanu knew him well, a man whose ambition left no room for sentiment. Their past encounters had been battles of principle, Keanu's belief in people clashing with Victor's pursuit of power. The threat of Apex's expansion wasn't just a business move, it was a direct challenge to the garden, to the fragile hope it represented. Keanu felt the tension coiling tighter, a storm of a different kind brewing on the horizon. The images of those days stayed with him, his awkward first attempts at planting, Lila's laughter ringing like a bell, Clara's quiet strength as she shared her past in her cluttered apartment, the late nights when he poured his heart into designs that could protect a community's dream. These moments held a quiet power, a story that could draw others in, just as Keanu had been drawn to the garden. His initial curiosity, sparked by Clara's secret, mirrored the pull of discovery that could captivate an audience. The hidden talents of Riverbank, Evan's coding, Thomas's architectural eye, Nina's farming wisdom, Clara's scientific mind were revelations that turned strangers into heroes. Keanu's connection with Lila, rooted in shared memories of music and loss, and his bond with Clara, forged through mutual respect, wove a thread of humanity through the struggle. And the looming threat of Victor Lang, a man who saw land as profit rather than promise, set the stage for a fight that would test them all. That evening, as Keanu knelt in the garden, feeling the earth soften between his fingers, he realized this soil held more than roots. It held the rebirth of a people once forgotten. It wasn't just about crops or designs, it was about reclaiming what had been overlooked: talent, dreams, people. The community was no longer just a group of neighbors, they were a force, bound by shared purpose. The battle with Apex was coming, and with it, the chance to prove that even in the face of greed, a garden could grow. Keanu looked at the stars above, the same ones he'd once watched with his mother, and felt a quiet certainty: this was where he was meant to be. The air in Victor Lang's sleek office was sharp with tension, the kind that lingers when old wounds meet new battles. Keanu stood beside Clara, their resolve a quiet force against the polished arrogance of the man before them. Victor, CEO of Apex Realty, leaned back in his leather chair, his smile as cold as the glass walls surrounding them. Years ago, their paths collided over a humanitarian documentary Keanu tried to produce one. Victor shut down, seeing no profit in telling stories of the forgotten. Now, Keanu was here to ask for the land that could save Riverbank's garden, but Victor's response was as expected as it was cutting. A garden? He scoffed, waving a hand toward blueprints of a gleaming shopping complex. "I'm building progress, not playing in the dirt." Clara, her voice steady but fierce, stepped forward. "This garden is survival, Victor. It's food, hope, community, not a hobby." Her words, grounded in years of suppressed expertise, hung heavy, but Victor's laugh sliced through them. "My vision," he said, "is bigger than vegetables." The rejection stung, but Keanu felt a fire ignite within him, fueled by the faces of Riverbank, Lila's determined eyes, Evan's quiet brilliance, Clara's unyielding spirit. Victor's cold refusal wasn't about the land. It was about power, about who gets seen, who gets heard, and who gets erased. Keanu's mind raced, drawing on a lesson his mother had taught him long ago: when the powerful say no, you find a way to make them listen. Back in Riverbank, he gathered the community in Mrs. Harper's living room, the same cramped space where despair had once taken root. "We're not just fighting for a garden," he told them, his voice low but resolute. "We're fighting for a future." He proposed a bold plan: transform the garden into a city-backed urban agriculture project, a beacon of sustainability that no developer could ignore. Clara, her scientist's mind alight, began compiling years of research on resilient farming. Evan coded a website to share their story, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with purpose. Lila, with the unfiltered courage of youth, insisted on speaking for the children who saw the garden as their sanctuary. The plan culminated in a press conference on the muddy patch where the old garden had stood. Under a gray sky, Clara stood at a makeshift podium, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime's expertise. She spoke of soil health, water conservation, and the power of community-driven agriculture, her data painting a vision that was both practical and profound. Evan, his wheelchair positioned proudly at her side, shared how his app could help other towns replicate their model, his shy smile breaking through as the crowd applauded. Lila, clutching a salvaged tomato plant, looked out at the reporters and said, "This garden is where I learned I can grow anything, even dreams." Her words, simple and raw, brought tears to more than one set of eyes. Keanu took the microphone last, his voice steady but thick with emotion. He told the story of his mother, a woman who lost her home to developers like Victor, who taught him that true strength lies in building for others. "This fight," he said, "is for her, for Lila, for every person who's been told their dreams don't matter." The community's petition, signed by hundreds, was delivered to City Hall that day, a chorus of voices demanding change. The tide began to turn. News outlets picked up the story, drawn by the unlikely alliance of a former film star, a scientist turned housekeeper, and a town that refused to break. Social media buzzed with images of Lila's tomato plant and Evan's app, hashtags like #ResilienceGarden spreading like wildfire. Victor, cornered by public pressure and the city's growing interest in the project, faced a choice. Keanu learned through a contact that Victor had been offered permits for another development in exchange for conceding the riverbank land, a deal that served his ego as much as his wallet. In a terse meeting, Victor signed over the plot, his smirk betraying a man who thought he'd still won. But Keanu knew the real victory belonged to Riverbank. The Resilience Garden rose from the earth like a promise kept. Domed structures, designed by Thomas's architectural eye, shielded crops from storms. Smart irrigation systems, inspired by Clara's research, turned rain into an ally. Evan's app monitored growth, its data shared freely with other communities. The garden wasn't just a place to grow food, it was a classroom, a laboratory, a haven. Clara led research programs, her expertise no longer buried. Thomas oversaw construction, his sketches coming to life in steel and soil. Nina taught sustainable farming to new volunteers, her laughter a staple of the garden's rhythm. The garden fed 50 families, its surplus donated to local shelters. A land trust, funded by donations sparked by the campaign, protected nearby homes from predatory developers, ensuring Riverbank's families could stay. The garden's opening was marked by a festival under a sky painted with the warm hues of dusk. The community gathered, their faces glowing with pride and possibility. Lila, now a little taller but no less spirited, stood on a small stage, her voice clear as she sang a song she'd written about roots that grow through storms. Keanu, his old guitar in hand, joined her, their notes weaving a melody that felt like home. The crowd, some wiping tears, others swaying, erupted in applause as the song ended. Lila then stepped down from the stage and walked to the center of the garden. Carefully, she placed her tomato plant not in the soil but in a glass case beneath a wooden canopy. A reminder. A relic. A seed that survived the storm. The plaque beneath it read, "This is where we learn to grow dreams." It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder that beauty could emerge from struggle. Later, Keanu learned that the festival had birthed True Talents, an organization that had already helped 100 people in Riverbank find work that matched their skills: coders, designers, teachers, dreamers, all given a chance to shine. As the festival wound down, Keanu walked to the banks of the Willow River, its waters calm under the fading light. He sat on a smooth stone, the hum of the community behind him, and let his thoughts drift. The garden had taught him something profound: talent, the kind that changes the world, isn't rare, it's universal, waiting in every heart, often overlooked by systems that value profit over people. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, her lessons about kindness and resilience now alive in this place. Keanu realized his path had shifted. Making films had been his craft, but this lifting up the forgotten, giving voice to the silenced was his calling. The Resilience Garden wasn't just a victory over Victor, it was a blueprint for what humanity could achieve when it saw every person as a source of light. The images of that day lingered, the garden's vibrant rose under protective domes, Lila's song soaring, Keanu's guitar strumming a quiet harmony, the community's applause rising like a tide, all framed by a sunset that felt like a blessing. These moments carried a power that could ripple outward, a story of triumph that satisfied the heart and stirred the soul. Their voices rose not perfect, but full of soul. And in a world addicted to perfection, it was this raw, fragile beauty that broke through the noise, shared by those who felt its warmth. The message that every person holds a spark of genius, waiting to be nurtured, was one that could inspire anyone to look closer, to listen deeper, to build together. As Keanu gazed at the river, he knew this was only the beginning. The world was full of gardens waiting to grow, and he would help them bloom, one forgotten soul at a time. Keanu's story isn't just about a hidden garden, it's a quiet reminder that within each of us lies a rare and precious gift, waiting to be seen, nurtured, and shared. I truly believe the world becomes a better place when we choose to lift one another up. So take a moment, look within yourself, or to someone around you. Find that hidden light, and help it shine. Thank you for watching Motivation for Success. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a spark of hope today. If you've ever seen someone's light go unnoticed, share their name below. Let's create a wall of unsung heroes. And if you believe kindness and talent belong to everyone, not just the privileged, share this story.